Okay, I'm live. Took me a second. Make sure I was going live. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to get better lighting. It's so dark. Okay. Well, welcome back, y'all. Sorry about last week if you tuned in and it never started. We had some pretty bad weather in Texas and some family stuff. And anyways, we're just happy to be back this week and finishing up this 4-part series. And then our next series is going to be really exciting. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. So want to just jump right in. This is our 4th part, and it is the second part of our frequently asked questions. The last 2 weeks ago, I talked about the most common questions I was asked as a surrogate, and not so much as a professional, but just as an actual gestational carrier. And so this week, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but also more on the professional side of things as somebody in the industry that helps women become surrogates and go through the process. So again, I spoke to several surrogates that I've worked with in the past, and we kind of compiled this list together of what we feel like were the most commonly asked questions. So let's get started. So first one is the biggest, probably number one question I get asked is, are you related to the baby? So that is, what's the difference between a gestational surrogate and a traditional surrogate? And that is a really common question. And most people, I think of when they think of surrogacy, they think that the woman who is carrying the baby is biologically or genetically related to the baby. And while that is something that happens, that's traditional surrogacy, it happens a lot less. Mainly because science has come a long way, and there is something called gestational surrogacy, and it's just the laws in a lot of states are not as friendly for traditional surrogacy. It's just a little bit of a stickier situation. It can be done in many states legally, but it is a little bit of a stickier situation. So gestational surrogates are women who carry a baby for someone else, but they are not biologically related to the baby. The intended parents are either biologically, but they're also ethically, morally, legally the intended parents for the baby. A traditional surrogate typically uses her own, well, not typically, just a traditional surrogate uses her own egg to create the embryo and then gestates and delivers the baby. So as a gestational surrogate, it's either the intended parent's sperm and egg that are creating the embryo, or a sperm donor and an egg donor, or a sperm donor and the intended mother, or, some form, but it has nothing to do with the surrogate. The surrogate is not at all biologically related at all to the baby. They're the oven. They are the carrier. Benefits of using a surrogacy agency. We get asked this a lot. And as somebody who has done an independent journey and has worked with an agency, and then of course now professionally works for an agency, I think people might think that my thought on it, because I work for an agency, is that I'm going to think an agency is better just because of that. And that's not true. I do think that you should work with an agency, and it's not because I work for an agency. It's just because I've done both on my own. Before I ever worked for an agency, I was an independent surrogate, and I was with an agency. And I talked about this, I think in my second live, why I really preferred working for an agency. But the biggest benefit is that your intended parents are going to be fully vetted. And for intended parents, the surrogates can be fully vetted. So you're not just randomly meeting somebody. And I was lucky in my independent journey. It was through a mutual friend. And so there was not like a meeting on social media where you had to hope that that person was a good person to work with. And both sides, that goes on both sides. We see lots of things happen in the industry anything can happen at any time, but you do see more happen when an agency isn't involved, because a lot of times in an independent journey, when agency isn't involved, a lot of times people are skipping steps. And so with an agency, we're fully vetting everybody on both sides. We're making matches based on what both sides are looking for. So nobody's having to give up something they really want, because we'll just match them with the person that fits them and what they want the best. So it's not like I met you here and this is really what you want, but this is really what I want. But, I met you and you're going to do it. And so now we have to just kind of figure out a way to make that work. That's not how we do things. So the benefit is you're getting somebody who's fully vetted. The agency has done all of that. They've done the background checks and they've looked at medical records, and done psychological evaluations. They've probably met. I know with Fairfax Surrogacy, we like, if we can meet you in person, great. Otherwise, we definitely do a face-to-face for every single one of our surrogates and intended parents. They're also the ones that are going to help navigate the whole entire thing. They're going to help schedule travel for the surrogate. They're going to collect medical records and then run, do all the background checks and all that. They're going to send the records to the intended parents clinic. There's just a lot of legwork. They're going to schedule the psychological evaluation, and coordinate everything, make sure everything's being paid. Escrow is set up, surrogates getting paid on time, all of that. So the biggest benefit really is just having that facilitation, that there is somebody who is an industry professional with tons of experience doing this that's going to just guide the whole entire journey. So that to me was a really big benefit. And also just a benefit, personally speaking, was not having to have that discussion about financials. I really didn't like that in my first journey. It wasn't something I found to be very comfortable to have those discussions. And so that's something I really liked about using an agency. And actually, with my agent, I became really close with my second set of intended fathers. But it was one point where I was wondering if they'd want to do a sibling journey or not, just to kind of plan life. I wasn't really planning on doing another journey. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do another journey if they don't want to with somebody else. It was just kind of like, just want to know in life, am I going to do another pregnancy or not? And I was just kind of talking to my case manager. At that time, we were working together because I was working at the agency. And she's like, do you want me to reach out to him? And I didn't take her up on it. I was like, no, I just need to get the guts and say, hey, what are you guys thinking? And they were thinking the same thing. Like, actually, that's so funny you asked because we were just talking about it. But so an agency does, I mean, even that, it's just, they become, your case manager and the person you work with in intake, they just become your friends and advocate and all that. And so that's something I really like about using an agency. What is the embryo transfer like? So an embryo transfer, I mean, just like pregnancy and delivery and just everything, it's going to be different. How somebody perceives it or how it feels to them is going to be different for everybody. But it's a really, really very basic procedure. It's much like getting a pap smear done. You're in a exam room essentially, or, a medical room at the clinic. You're on an exam table, much like you would be at your OB's. You're in stirrups, much like you would be at your OB's. A speculum is placed, much like it is for a pap smear. Difference is there is also a sonogram going on, an abdominal sonogram happening at the same time so that they can see the uterus. And then instead of doing like a swab at the cervix, they're taking a catheter through the cervix with the embryo or embryos to transfer them into the surrogate's uterus. So some clinics will like to give a surrogate Valium or any other kind of medication that helps them relax. My first clinic did not offer something like that, and the second one did. It definitely helped me relax more, but I had already been through the procedure before, so there's a lot of nerves the first time and not knowing what to expect. And then, of course, if it's going to be successful, because every surrogate, I think all they want is to be successful for their intended parents. They just want it. You want it as bad as they want it. Probably not quite as much as they want it because they've been through so much, but you definitely get really, really invested as a surrogate. So the Valium was nice. The only thing I didn't like about it was, I had a companion with me, is that I just felt like I felt really tired and I didn't feel like fully aware. I definitely would not have done that if I was by myself. I would not have wanted to take an Uber back alone or any kind of public transportation. Obviously, I wouldn't have been able to drive. So if I had to have gone to that appointment alone, I would definitely have opted out of doing a Valium. But not every clinic offers that, and some make it optional, some require it, some don't offer it at all. But it's a pretty fairly easy procedure. It's really quick, as quick as just getting a pap smear. The only thing is some clinics do require that they all require a full bladder because then they can see when they're doing that abdominal sonogram. And then other ones will like you to stay in place and like lay there for 30 minutes, which can be uncomfortable if you drink a ton of water like you're supposed to. And then other clinics are totally different. They get you up right away. Some have you do bed rest afterwards. Some just say take it easy. Some say go about your regular activity level. So every clinic is going to be different. So it's super important that you pay attention when they're giving you your medicine protocol and what you're supposed to do leading up to that embryo transfer and after the embryo transfer. Another really, really big question, I don't even know why I put it as my number 4 because it's probably the number 2 question I get asked is, "What's including your compensation? Did you come out of pocket for anything? How much did you make?" I don't ever talk about how much I made, but I will say on average, and I think I talked about this last time, is anywhere from 35 to probably 45,000 for a first-time surrogate. Um, what was included in my compensation? That's it. That was my base compensation, was like a flat fee, and that was paid in, I think mine was 8 installments, my first one, and maybe my second journey was 10 installments. It's been a few years, I've slept since then. But that was pretty much it, and then I had some other things like getting maternity clothes, getting the embryo transfer fee, anytime I had lost wages, like for my travel or for giving birth, and all of that was, in addition. No, I did not come out of pocket for anything. Everything was paid for by my intended parents. Anything, when I traveled and I had to park at the airport and I had to get an Uber, all of that was reimbursed to me. Food expenses with traveling was reimbursed to me. I had to get chiropractic care during my pregnancy, and that was paid for by my intended parents. That was previously agreed upon, because I knew it was something that my midwife would require. So I put that, as one of the things when I was matching, and it was in my contract. So no, I didn't come out of pocket for anything. As a surrogate, you should not come out of pocket for anything. Everything should be covered by your intended parents. How did you explain what you were doing to your kids? Gosh, I don't even know if I can remember how I explained it to my kids. I think I just told them I'm going to have a baby for somebody who can't. The first time I had an intended mom and a dad, so a heterosexual couple, and I just said that her uterus had gotten sick, and so she was not able to carry a baby because you have to have a healthy uterus to be able to do that, and so she needed help, and so that's what I was going to do. There are now really, and probably back then I just didn't know about it, but there are really amazing books that explain about surrogacy, and actually they are really great books for surrogates' children and intended parents' children to talk about where their babies came from, and to how to prepare for that. I find that kids are really resilient and not always as inquisitive as you think they might be about things that they're really not all that interested in. And that's speaking as a midwife who likes to really explain things. When my kids ask stuff like, "What does it mean when her water breaks?" And I get kind of technical on that, and then they lose interest very quickly. And I felt the same about surrogacy. They did not seem to care about the details. They thought it was cool, and they thought it was fun, and they loved both sets of my intended parents. Um, but yeah, I did not find that it was a difficult thing to explain to them. And even my older son, who I think was 12, 10 or 12 at the time. And he super smart little guy. And he also just a basic conversation, and he had really not a lot of questions. Um, how did you tell your friends and family you're going to do surrogacy? I see this posted in support groups all the time, and I see people say something totally, everybody says something different. Everybody saves their announcement. I see a lot that announce it once they're pregnant. I see some people who announce it once they are accepted or matched, or some announce it like when they're starting to show. And they're like, "Might have noticed if you see me out, and this is what's going on." I announced it when I decided to be a surrogate. Once I talked to my husband and like my closest friends, I was a student midwife at the time. So I talked to my preceptor about it, talked to my mom about it. My mother-in-law, I talked to her, not really for anybody's permission. I'm not really one to ask for permission for things. If I really feel passionate about something, it's more of just I shared, this is what I'm going to do. My husband, I did have a conversation about it. I didn't ask either, but I definitely had an open conversation with him. Everybody else, it was just sharing what I was going to be doing and how that was going to impact our lives as a family and needing help. And then of course, with my apprenticeship as a midwife, how that was going to impact that. And just making sure that my preceptor was happy and fine. And, we had it all worked out with me being pregnant during my apprenticeship. So I was one of those people that just said it from the very beginning. Once I talked to them, I kind of posted on Facebook, like, I'm going to become a surrogate, and really excited about that. I think I was matched when I did post about it. I think I posted in some moms groups that I was thinking about being one and asking if anybody else had been one, but I didn't really post on my page, like I'm doing it until I was matched. But again, that was an independent journey, and I was really just looking for if this was even a possibility of something I could actually do. And of course, everybody was super supportive. I think I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Everybody in my life was really, really supportive. I'm really lucky in that sense that I have really supportive people in my world. And of course, as a midwife, I work with women who love pregnancy and birth and all of those things. And so, yeah, I had super supportive family and friends. And because I was in an apprenticeship, I wasn't necessarily, I didn't have a job at the time. I wasn't working. I was going to school and doing this apprenticeship. I didn't have a boss or anything I had to tell. My preceptor was the closest thing to that. And she was a midwife. So she was thrilled. She was very excited. In fact, she did lots of my injections for me. Let's see. How do the medications make you feel? So everybody is different on how they're affected by medications. Some people feel great on them. Some people feel terrible on them. Some people have the typical reactions to them, the side effects. I will say birth control pills, I gained some weight on them, but nothing really crazy on that. Estrogen was probably the thing that affected me the most. My body responds really, really well to estrogen. So both times when I got it, I would say irritable is a really, really nice way to describe how I was. My husband, if he was here, he would probably add to that. I was definitely irritable, and then some. Estrogen was definitely the worst for me. And the more I took it and the closer I got to my embryo transfer, the thicker my lining was becoming in my uterus. And so I definitely got more crampy and bloated and things like that. But I would say the irritability was like the biggest thing that stood out for me when taking estrogen. Progesterone, for me, the first time I didn't really feel any different until I was pregnant and my body was starting to produce progesterone also. And then I was taking the supplemental progesterone for a while. Um, I was just really tired. The second time I was on more progesterone than I had been with my first journey. And that one I definitely was a little more affected. I felt dizzy on it. And then just your typical pregnancy symptoms. I felt tired. I felt kind of nauseous. I felt tired. That was the biggest thing. I felt really tired. But otherwise, I felt fine. So, like I said, everybody gets affected a little bit differently. Oh, and I did take Lupron with my second journey, which is a subcutaneous injection. So it goes like in your tummy. And I took that for a few weeks. And I don't feel like I really had a whole lot of symptoms from that, besides just kind of like I took it like at the same time as really taking birth control pills. So just I think um, just some weight gain from those two things combined. So yeah, but I've also seen surrogates have like every side effect, like Lupron. Some people say they get really thirsty on it. They get really bad headaches on it. Most people complain about birth control of just gaining weight. Estrogen, I would say most times people say they feel really irritable. And then of course, bloating and cramping and things like that. And then progesterone, most of the time you hear either dizziness, being really tired, nausea. Some people have vomiting, but that's also progesterone is, the pregnancy hormone. So just kind of depends on how your body responds anyways to progesterone. And then, like I said, there's some people who take it and they're like, I feel great the whole entire time. So everybody has a little bit of different side effects to those. How long did the process take? So for me, I think I talked about this before. Both times it took a little bit of time just because I wanted an out of hospital birth with a midwife, because that's what I do also with my own family and as a professional. And so it did take me a little bit longer to match because we went independent the first time. Really, nothing happened until we matched. Then we did like the psychological evaluation and things like that. We skipped a lot of steps for sure. Things now that my parents and I probably both are all like a little cringy about. Thank gosh for both of us, all of us. It turned out well. My second time, the application process took probably about a month. Filling out the application and signing all the papers and stuff like that, just agreeing to everything. That was the easy part. I would say getting my medical records. And I still find that as doing intake at Fairfax, that tends to take a little bit of the longest, is obtaining records, reviewing those records. But as far as the actual application itself, it doesn't take but 20, 30 minutes, depending on how detailed you get in your responses. I probably take a little bit longer because I'm a detailed person, as you all can see. So I take a little bit longer because I give pretty long-winded answers to most things. And then for me, matching took a while because I was open to working with anyone. My only stipulations, I think, ever were I wanted a single embryo transfer and I wanted to have a home birth. Otherwise, I didn't care where they lived. I didn't care who they were. I didn't care about sexuality. I didn't care about any of it. I just they wanted to have a baby, I felt like they were deserving, and I was happy to work with them as long as they were open to my birthing choices. And only transferring one embryo. That was a big thing for me because I am a home birther. I like to keep, you have to be low risk to do that. And so I want to keep everything in my control, low risk. So I like to stick to one embryo. But I would say when I talk to people in the industry, when I'm doing intake for a surrogate, I usually say 4 to 6 weeks for the intake process. That's doing your application, sitting in everything that's needed, getting your records, having them reviewed, doing your psychological evaluation, getting the background check done, getting your driving report done, doing your lab work. All of that takes, it takes some time. I mean, typically our surrogates move pretty quickly. They get things done really fast. We move it really fast. We will, if you are like wanting to be a surrogate tomorrow, we will go as fast as we can. If you're like, take my time, I'm like happy just to keep learning and educating myself and whatever, we move at your speed. But I will always say that once we have other people involved, everything moves slower just because it has to, because there's just becomes more pieces. And you see that as you go. When you get done, you're like, wow, there's so many people are involved in creating this baby. It's incredible. And so when there's so many different, moving pieces, it does take a little bit more time. But I would say on average, from the time that you fill out the application to going to your embryo transfers, typically about 6 months. It can be as quick as 4 months. And of course, it can go way longer than that. Don't typically see it going that much longer. But 6 months is more of that, like everything's just kind of happening. 4 months is like everything just happened so fast. We got your records really quick. You got scheduled with everything quick. You loved the first or the second profile that you saw, and they were really quick in response, and you scheduled your match meeting really quick, and everybody said yes, like right then at the end of the match meeting, and your cycle just happened to be like right there and doing exactly what it needed. And so you got to have your medical screening really fast. And then your lawyers everybody was just super quick and agreeable, and legal was super fast. And so definitely it can go that fast when everything just goes really, really smoothly and everybody is just on the same page, which is what we like to see. That's how we try to match, is that everybody is on the same page and that everything is going to be super smooth. So we try to do a lot of it in the beginning. A lot of the legwork in the beginning. So that way, when we do match you, everything does just go that quickly and smoothly. So recap, 4 to 6 months, I would say, from the time you apply to your embryo transfer. And then can you choose your intended parents? I'm pretty sure I've talked about this every single time. The answer is yes, yes, yes. You can choose your intended parents. We talk about that in the beginning. I pretty much talk about that, I think, from the very first phone call. I usually will talk about, international versus domestic, and same sex versus heterosexual, and what do you think about termination? And I'm not talking about what you think about termination in your own life. I'm thinking, what do you think about when you think about intended parents and their journey, and how do you feel about termination in that sense? And how many embryos do you think you're going to want to transfer? And what kind of relationship do you want to have? And these things to think about the whole entire time. And then we talk about that in part 3 of our application. There's like where you fill out your profile, and we ask all those questions again. And I don't really ask those questions at the beginning. I kind of just give like a food for thought kind of thing. These are all your choices. Start thinking about that. So then that way, when you get to that part where you have to decide, it's a little bit easier for you because you've already thought about it. And then you just get to review profiles of intended parents who fit that criteria that you're looking for, and you will fit their criteria. And so, you get to pick them. They also have to pick you. So it's kind of like a dating app. You have to swipe, and so do they. But everybody gets to be on the same page, but everybody gets to choose who they work with. We usually, once I get pretty far into the application process with a surrogate, I usually have a good idea of who I think that they would want to match with. I get to know our intended parents well, and I get to know our surrogates really well. And so I usually have some kind of idea of who I think they would like. Sometimes I'm wrong, most times I'm right. But I don't ever show profiles just based on that. I will give a good amount of options so that the surrogate and the intended parents, everybody has a good choice to make. So that's all the questions I wrote down. What I'll tell you guys about, and if you have any other questions, I haven't seen any come through, but if you have any, go ahead and comment, or you can email me. My email is staylor@fairfaxsurrogacy.com, and you can find us online at www.fairfaxsurrogacy.com. And you can always email me. and ask me your questions. You can comment on here and ask me your questions. I'm always happy to answer any questions you have. And then we're going to take a little bit of a break from YouTube for a little bit because we have another big project coming up. And once we get it going, I will come back here and tell y'all about it and where to find it because we're pretty excited about it. But our next YouTube series is going to be talking to other surrogates. So we've come up with some other questions and we just want to get a take from other surrogates since you've just all heard my story. So when we come back to our next series, it'll be with different surrogates who have had multiple journeys, and you'll get to hear from them about what was different and the same in their journeys and just their advice on how that they would, what they would give to a first-time surrogate. And so we're really excited about that. So I hope y'all have an awesome rest of your week and weekend, and I'll see you back here in a few weeks.